morning, as soon as I woke up, I got my cell phone and kind of ran to an area where I could pick up signal, and there were 63 missed calls. So I knew something had happened. So I listened to the first message, which was somebody saying, you know, Ryan was in a car accident and he was taken to Blake Hospital, which is our local hospital. So I thought, well, good, you know, Blake Hospital is not a trauma center, so it can't be too bad. I used to work in that emergency room, and I knew the girl who answered, and I said, hey, this is, you know, Monica Costello, and I heard my son was there, and I was just trying to get some information. I'm out of town. And she said, hold on just a second. And she wouldn't talk to me, so right away I knew something was really wrong. We got in the car and we drove right to Tampa General Hospital, but still not really knowing what was going on. Nobody would really tell me a whole lot on the phone. So, you know, we got to the hospital, and, you know, I walked in the room. It was probably the hardest thing. I almost couldn't do it. And he was, you know, in intensive care, and being a nurse has its good points, but it's also a curse, because you know so much. You know too much. So I had worked many, many years in the emergency room and taken care of patients like Ryan many times, and had to talk to families like me so many times. It was just the thought of it happening to me, and you can't even imagine. And, you know, seeing Ryan had been intubated on a ventilator in ICU, and he looked perfect. There wasn't a scratch on him. He didn't even have a bruise. And I just remember thinking, how could he not wake up? He looks perfect.
The age limit for alcohol is based on research which shows that young people react differently to alcohol. Teens get drunk twice as fast as adults, but have more trouble knowing when to stop. Teens naturally overdo it and binge more often than adults. Enforcing the legal drinking age of 21 reduces traffic crashes, protects young people's maturing brains, and keeps young people safer overall. Retailers can take steps to make sure that teens can't buy alcohol from their stores, and they can serve as a source of information to reduce the possibility that alcohol legally sold to an adult will end up in a teenager's hand. Responsible retailing practices are key to preventing illegal alcohol sales, but it takes more than just telling your staff not to sell to minors. Responsible retailers need specific policies backed up by training and accountability that enable staff to say, if I sell to you, I'll lose my job.
I started talking to a lot of Ryan's friends and kids that were actually present that night, and even some that weren't present that night. And they all told me that that particular evening, Ryan and the boy who was driving the car had gone to Albertsons and purchased a lot of alcohol. They go to Albertsons because Albertsons is an easy target, and they will sell. They sell to these kids. They don't verify. Half the time they don't even card them. They even use a preferred savings card to get the discount on alcohol. These are 18 and 19-year-old kids who, you know, it's so easy to obtain that they're not even worried about staying there the extra time to make sure they get their discount. It's a tragedy. You know, Ryan did something that unfortunately too many people, too many kids do because of places like Albertsons that allow the sale of alcohol to underage kids that, you know, are not doing the appropriate checking.
Had Albertsons been more responsible in their retailing practices, the Ryan Costello his mother once knew, seen here, would not be the Ryan Costello of today. Today, the Insider Exclusive presents illegal liquor sales to minors, the Ryan Costello story, and how his lawyer, Woody Igu, at the law firm of Igu and Smith, got justice for Ryan and his family, proving a very challenging and tough case, earning him the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best traumatic brain injury trial lawyers in Florida and in America. He has seen many innocent, hardworking people suffer needless injury, and because of that, he is driven to help people who have been harmed by the negligent actions of others. His goal, not only to get justice for Ryan Costello and his family, but to make sure all retailers follow the laws and specific corporate policies backed up by training and accountability, to prevent illegal alcohol sales, to protect young people's maturing brains and keep them safer overall. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Orlando, Florida, with the law firm of Igoe and Smith. It is my great pleasure to introduce Woody Igoe. Welcome to the show, Woody.
Thank you for having me.
Tell our audience a little bit about your particular practice of law.
For years, I was working as a litigator for the insurance industry. I started specializing in brain injury cases. They were more complex and, to me, more interesting. Then I became national trial counsel for the insurance industry. I would fly from state to state defending and going against the idea that people had brain injury. I won many of those cases, almost all of them, and I felt badly because some of those people really were hurt. Had they been prepared, had they known the ins and outs, this is the human brain is the single most complex object in the universe. So, my sister suffered a brain injury and died. I got a website, braininjury.com, and I thought, let's put as much medical information about brain injury that we can find on the website.
We're here today to discuss a case where you helped the Costello family. Ryan Costello was a victim in this case, and tell us a little bit about who Ryan is.
Ryan was a young man living in Bradenton, Florida, popular, handsome, well-liked. 19 years old, he was starting college, wanted to go into business, wanted to be a drug rep. And unfortunately, none of that's going to be able to come to pass.
And why is that?
Well, he lived with his mother. While his mother was at a camp out some 100 miles away and out of touch, he and his brother decided to have a party. So they started calling people, and the Albertsons liquor store is 2 blocks away from their home.
And this is in what city?
In Bradenton, Florida.
Okay.
And as it happened, that Albertsons liquor store was the go-to place for the kids in Manatee High School.
And when you say go-to, what do you mean by go-to?
In every community, I analogize it to a hole in a balloon. Okay? If there's a prick in a balloon, all the air rushes to that one spot. So when the kids find out, oh, there's a place that's not checking IDs, word gets around. In Bradenton, there were 2 or 3 places.
And this was one of them.
And this was one of them, and they sold not just beer and wine, but hard liquor.
And on April 8th, 2006, what happened?
A group of them made 2 different trips to the Albertsons, and each time the eventual driver of the vehicle that hurt my client went in with fake identification. We don't know whether they were carded or not. They brought the alcohol back, went back to the party, and that happened a second time.
Right.
The difficulty for us, of course, was that the driver of the vehicle was killed and Ryan can't speak.
Right.
They went to the liquor store twice, and then later in the night, after much of the alcohol had been consumed, they were going to cross the bridge to pick up a friend to come to the party. They hit the edge of the bridge, the car flipped off and landed upside down in 12 feet of water. Ryan was untouched. His mom... Physically. His mother was a nurse. She, horribly was out in the woods, and the next morning she got into phone range and had 140 calls on her cell phone. She raced to the hospital. She saw her son and looked at this boy who had not a mark on him. But he had been underwater
for, what was it,
for 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
And he's never gotten out of his vegetative state.
So he will be in a vegetative state for the rest of his life.
Yes.
Now, when this case came to you, it came to you a year and a half after the incident. Monica Costello, Ryan's mother, had already seen 3 other lawyers, one of whom had settled the case in terms of the insurance for the maximum policy, whatever that was.
Yes.
When the case came to you, what did you see that all the other lawyers hadn't seen?
My staff said there's a call on braininjury.com. A woman wants you to sue the state of Florida for building a bad bridge. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, well, millions of people have crossed that bridge, including myself.
Yeah.
I'm not that interested. And they said, well, the son is paralyzed and severely brain injured. I said, well, I'll talk to her. So I said, how did this happen? She said, well, these kids were, the driver was drunk, and so was my son. I said, how old were they? Well, they were 19. And I said, well, obviously, we need to know where the alcohol came from.
Yes.
Because they were sold alcohol underage.
And no other lawyer had asked this?
The mother didn't know. Nobody knew.
Nobody even thought about it, did they?
Nobody even thought about it, because in these cases, you have to remember there's always videotape of the transactions.
Where the liquor's sold.
We could have gone in and with the alcohol, tobacco people and gotten all of that. Mm-hmm. But we couldn't a year and a half later.
Now, in every state, selling liquor to underage minors there are different laws. You have to meet certain thresholds. In the state of Florida, what is that threshold?
Our threshold is higher than any other state. And that is, you knowingly and unlawfully sold alcohol to a minor. Now, when you say knowingly, that takes out the idea that this is a one-time mistake or this is just a negligent sale.
And I think that's important for our audience to understand. Knowingly means it has to be a pattern of conduct.
You have to
it has to have it repeatedly, right?
Right. You can't just show that on that night they forgot to card the person.
Yeah. So here you are. You're faced with trying to prove something that most people would consider almost impossible. What's your strategy to prove it?
I began to hear from the high school kids.
And they were reluctant to talk to you, weren't they?
Yes. Now, yes. They didn't voluntarily come and ring my phone. Mm-hmm. We really had a hard time. They don't want to talk about how they broke the law. They don't want their parents to know that they had a fake ID, all of those things.
Right.
But gradually we got a dozen of them to come forward and say, oh yes, well I've purchased alcohol at this Albertsons from this particular manager 36 times, 50 times, 70 times.
Now you got another problem. They're not going to come to a court of law and say this, so what do you have to do?
I have to handcuff them to a chair.
No, seriously.
What we ended up doing, and again, I can't send in a minor.
Right.
I had a relative of Ryan's volunteer. She's 21 years old. We put a video camera in her purse.
Hidden surveillance.
Hidden surveillance. We sent her in with different guises, but she would go in, purchase the alcohol, and the main thing is, was she asked to produce an ID? Because the national standard and Albertsons standard is, if you look under 30, you will be carded.
Right. And
she obviously looked under 30.
Yeah, and we're showing, as you're talking, one of the surveillance, because you did a lot of them. You ended up with how many times did people go in and purchase alcohol?
Well, I wanted to show a pattern at Albertsons, so we did a number of buys at that particular store,
yes,
a number of buys at other stores in Manatee County,
yeah,
and then we even came to Orlando, put a camera inside of a huge box on the back of a pickup truck and shot through the window to get even more from the grocery store side.
And they didn't see this?
No. And so we ended up with approximately 30 videos of purchases, more than half of which they weren't asked for ID.
Now, you also brought into this case, and we're going to have him on here in a little bit, Major Mark Willingham, right?
Yes.
Who worked as a Florida State policeman, working in this particular area of alcohol sales, correct?
Yes.
How did he contribute to the success of settling this case?
Mr. Willingham showed that this program of training, and let me show you this. This is the entirety of Albertson's training program. Okay?
It fits on a cigarette package.
Yes. I mean, there's more information on the back of a beer bottle than this. This was their program.
Right.
And Mr. Willingham showed that that was woefully inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now, and there should have been then, things called mystery shopper programs where they come in and test whether or not the rules are being followed. Yeah. And I'll tell you how Mr. Willingham shook them, and the case shook them, is that during the pendency of this litigation, they instituted a full-blown revision of their alcohol program nationally.
Right. Now, it's important for our audience to understand that you were so well prepared that Albertson settled before you went to court, right?
Yes.
They knew that you had them, and you had them good, particularly since you had all these surveillance tapes, etc.
Well, it wasn't as much the surveillance tapes, because those were 2 years after.
Yeah.
We had all of these students combined 160 purchases before this accident happened. Yeah. So between those two, it was a lot of evidence.
We have with us today one of the key people that helped you settle this case, Major Mark Willingham. We're going to bring him on right now so he can tell us a little bit about how corporations are supposed to sell liquor. So let's bring him on right now. It's my great pleasure to introduce Major Mark Willingham to the show. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Steve.
You are retired law enforcement in Florida, aren't you?
Correct.
What did you do exactly?
For 28 years, I regulated, policed, and assisted the alcoholic beverage industry in Florida.
And you said there were how many retail outlets in Florida that are authorized to sell liquor?
There are about 40,000 beverage retailers in Florida that are licensed to sell beer, wine, or liquor, contributing about $1.4 billion a year in tax revenue to the state of Florida.
And do you know right offhand how many people that work with law enforcement actually go out and monitor and check these retail outlets?
Well, the Florida Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco has about 125 special agents assigned to do that.
40,000 outlets. Huh?
Additionally, county and city police departments can also do the same thing.
This Ryan Costello case must have interested you a lot. You helped significantly in making sure that it gets settled properly. What is the value of civil lawsuits in cases like this?
Typically, a beverage retailer faces an administrative charge against their license for selling to a minor if it can be proved. The clerk faces a criminal charge, but the criminal charge is a second-degree misdemeanor, generally no substantial penalty and certainly no jail time. Administratively, the license is only in jeopardy after the third or fourth violation that can be proved. Neither of those provide much deterrent value to beverage retailers to encourage them to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So I look at the civil justice system, the end result of bringing a lawsuit against a beverage retailer who is doing the wrong thing, as really the principal way to control behavior in the alcoholic beverage industry. If a beverage retailer has an imposed penalty of $1 million or $10 million against their business, it's certainly going to cause them to change their behavior, and believe me, it will cause other beverage retailers in the area to change their behavior as well.
And as Woody mentioned, you know, during the pendency of this case, Albertson did change their manner of selling liquor, didn't they?
Yes.
How did they change it, by the way? I'm just curious.
Well, what they had was almost non-existent. I testified in deposition that it was perhaps the worst training program and alcohol sales policy that I had ever seen, particularly when you look at a company that big that has that level of resource that could have been committed to making their alcohol policies, practices, and employee training a model for the country. They chose not to do that. Yeah. I understand that they have improved their program, but I have not reviewed their new program, so I'm just not able to make a comment about it.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for being on the program and thank you for contributing to the success of this lawsuit, and best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
You know, in these types of cases, when you're faced with immense challenges, when do you know what's a good settlement or not, and when to settle?
It's difficult because many in the public say these kids had a fake ID, these kids are going to get it anyway.
Yeah.
But back up for a second. Let's say we don't know anything about alcohol, and I tell you, there's a drug that's addictive. There's a drug that is involved in 70% of the crime in our nation. There is a drug that kills thousands of people a year. Now, do you think someone who sold that drug and makes billions of dollars a year should have to comply with some rules?
Mm-hmm.
And if you take alcohol out of it, of course, oh my gosh, it should be banned. What is it? And then you say, that's alcohol. And then maybe you talk sense into people.
Yeah.
But our culture has gotten so away from responsibility on the part of the retailer that it's astounding. When this lawsuit came out, the response in the local newspaper was horrifying, vilified the mother.
Yeah. Why are you blaming Albertsons, right?
Why are you blaming the child?
Yeah. But actually, had Albertsons not sold the liquor to this, to her son, he would still be with us in his normal state.
He would still be.
I want to thank you very much for spending time with us on the show. Congratulations on the case again. And we're going to put your website up again, www.braininjury.com, where you can get a lot of information about brain injuries. Thank you, Woody.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.